I woke up to the sound of typing. Leon was at his desk, his back a rigid line of tension. He hadn't even looked at me when I got out of bed, but the air in the room was thick with a new kind of dread. "Don't check the forums," Leon said, his voice like dry ice. Naturally, I checked the forums. The leak. The headline was everywhere. Scholarship fraud. Did Noah Miller falsify his entry exams? Below the headline was a series of cropped images of my original application documents, highlighted with red circles claiming inconsistencies in my previous school's transcripts. It was a lie, a surgical, professional-grade lie. My stomach dropped into my shoes. "This is your father," I whispered, the phone trembling in my hand. "He's actually doing it. He's erasing me. He doesn't just erase people." "Noah," Leon said, finally turning around. His face was a mask of calculated fury. "He dismantles them. He wants to show me what happens when I associate with distractions." "I have to go to the dean," I said, grabbing my bag, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I have the original papers in my trunk. I can prove." "It won't matter," Leon interrupted, standing up and crossing into my territory. He didn't stop at the tape this time. He stopped right in front of me, his shadow tall and imposing. "Board of directors is already meeting. My father doesn't play to win an argument. He plays to end the game, the choice." For the next 3 hours, I was a ghost. People moved away from me in the hallways. The whispers weren't about the soup anymore. They were about integrity and criminality. I went to the administration office, but the registrar wouldn't even see me. "The matter is under review," was all the secretary would say. I retreated to room 402. Sitting on the edge of my bed in the dark, I felt like I was disappearing. Everything I'd worked for, the double shifts, the late nights, the chance for a real future, was being burned down by a man who didn't even know my last name yesterday. The door opened. Leon walked carrying a leather briefcase. "Pack your things," he said. I looked up, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "Already? You couldn't even wait for the official letter to kick me out?" "Not your clothes, Noah. Your laptop and your original files," Leon snapped. He looked different. There was a spark in his whiskey-colored eyes that I'd never seen before. It wasn't the golden boy look. It was the look of a rebel. "We're going to the board meeting. They won't let us in." "They'll let me in," Leon said, straightening his tie. "And you're coming with me as my legal consultant. I've spent my whole life learning how to navigate my father's world. It's time I used that education for something other than making him happy." The boardroom. We didn't just walk into the meeting. Leon practically kicked the doors open. Senator Vance was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, surrounded by the dean and the board. He looked at us, at Leon specifically, with a look of cold disappointment. "Leon, this is a profession," the senator said. "Take Mr. Miller back to his quarters so he can begin his exit process." "No," Leon said. He walked to the center of the room, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I've spent the last 4 hours cross-referencing the leaked documents with the school's encrypted server. I found the IP address of the person who uploaded the alterations." He set a tablet on the table and slid it toward the dean. "The upload came from a VPN registered to Vance Holdings," Leon said, his voice never wavering. "If this board moves forward with the expulsion of Noah Miller based on fabricated evidence produced by a member of this very board, well, I imagine the press would find that even more viral than a bowl of soup." The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at Leon's profile, the sharp jaw, the determined eyes. He was throwing away his trajectory to save mine. The senator stood up, his face darkening. "You're making a mistake, Leon, a permanent one, for the first time in my life." "Father," Leon replied, looking him straight in the eye, "I don't think I am." The aftermath. We walked back to the room in total silence. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a heavy, terrifying weight. Leon had just declared war on the most powerful man in the state. When we got inside 402, Leon didn't go to his desk. He sat on my bed, my messy, unmade bed, and let out a long, shaky breath. "You're an idiot," I said, leaning against the door. "He's going to cut you off. You just lost everything." Leon looked up, a small, genuine smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I don't know. I still have my GPA. I still have my scholarship." And apparently, he looked at the blue tape on the floor, then back at me. "I still have the most annoying roommate in the history of St. Jude's." I walked over and sat down next to him. Our shoulders touched. The enemy's label was officially dead. "Thanks, Leon," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "We still have 5 chapters left of this mess." I laughed, and for the first time since I'd arrived at this school, the room didn't feel small. It felt like a fortress. Chapter 6. The midnight shift. The victory in the boardroom felt like a fever dream by the time the sun went down. The school hadn't officially cleared my name yet, but the rumors had shifted from fraud to conspiracy. For the first time, the stares in the hallway weren't mocking, they were curious, and they were all directed at the two of us. Leon had been cut off. I knew it before he told me. I saw it in the way he stared at his phone. No more missed calls, no more messages. Just a cold, dead silence from the Vance empire. "We need to study," Leon said at 11 p.m., his voice cracking the silence of room 402. He was staring at his bank app. I didn't have to look to know he was calculating how many weeks he could survive on a dwindling balance. "The library is closed for the gala cleanup," I said, looking up from my sketch pad. "And honestly, you look like you're about to pass out." "I have the keys to the restricted archives," he replied, standing up and grabbing his blazer. "The heat is off in the dorm, and I can't think while it's this quiet. Are you coming or not?" The archives. The restricted section of the St. Jude's library was a labyrinth of dust and leather. It was the only place on campus that didn't feel like it was watching us. We found a small mahogany table tucked between two towering shelves of legal history. A single green-shaded lamp provided the only light, casting long, flickering shadows against the gold-leaf spines of the books. "I've never seen you without a tie," I remarked, watching him as he spread out his notes. He'd ditched the blazer, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He looked human, relaxed even. "I've never seen you actually finish a chapter without checking your phone 5 times. He shot back, though there was a tired smirk on his face. "We worked in silence for 2 hours. It wasn't the jagged, angry silence from chapter 1. It was a rhythm. The scratching of his fountain pen against paper, the rustle of my textbook pages. "Why did you do it?" I asked suddenly, the question burning a hole in my mind. "You knew what he'd do. You lost the car, the credit cards, trajectory. Was I really worth that much?" Leon stopped writing. He stared at the green lamp for a long time. "It wasn't just about you, Noah," he said softly. "It was about the fact that for 19 years, I haven't made a single choice that belonged to me. Every grade, every friend, every word was a script. Saving you, that was the first thing I did because I wanted to." He looked at me then, his eyes dark and unreadable. "And besides, who else would keep me on my toes if you were gone?" The shift. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, closing the distance between us. The air in the library was cool, but the space between us felt like a furnace. "You're a terrible liar, Vance," I whispered. "And you're a distraction," he breathed, but he didn't pull away. His hand was resting on the table, inches from mine. I reached out, my pinky finger hooking around. It was a tiny movement, but in the silence of the archives, it felt like a landslide. Leon didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with mine. His skin was cool, his grip firm. We sat there like that, 2 scholarship kids in a room built for kings, holding on to the only thing that felt real in this entire gilded nightmare. "The blue tape is still on the floor," I noted, my voice barely a breath. "I think we can move the border," Leon replied. He leaned in, his forehead coming to rest against mine. I could smell the sandalwood and the faint scent of old paper. My heart was thumping so hard I was sure he could feel it through the table. "Leon." The sound of a security guard's flashlight hitting the far wall made us both jump back. We scrambled to gather our books, our fingers brushing in the dark as we tried to hide our joined hands. The return. We walked back to the dorm under a canopy of freezing stars. Neither of us spoke, but the distance between us in the hallway had vanished. We walked to shoulder out, occasionally brushing. When we stepped back into room 402, Leon stopped at the door. He looked down at the blue painter's tape that divided the floor. He reached down, grabbed the end of the tape, and with one long, slow motion, he ripped it off the wood. He balled it up and tossed it into the trash can. "I think," Leon said, looking at me with a tired, genuine smile, "that the room is finally big enough for both of us." "Finally," I agreed, my chest feeling lighter than it had in weeks. As I lay that night, watching the moonlight hit the spot where the tape used to be, I realized that while the war might be over, something much more complicated and much more terrifying was just beginning. Chapter 7. The fever break. The fallout of Leon's rebellion wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, grinding attrition. For 2 weeks, he had been living on black coffee and the sheer, stubborn will to prove he didn't need the Vance name to survive. He was working 3 different tutoring jobs on top of our project, and the golden boy was starting to look like he was made of glass. I woke up at 4 a.m. to a sound that wasn't a snarky comment or the clicking of a pen. It was a wet, jagged cough, followed by a low moan that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Leon?" Sitting up, no answer. Just the sound of shivering so hard the bed frame was rattling against the wall. The collapse. I didn't wait for permission to cross the no man's land. I sat on the edge of his bed, the bed that used to be a sacred, untouchable monument, and reached out. When my hand touched his forehead, I almost pulled back. He was burning. Leon, hey, look at me. His eyes drifted open, but they were glassy, unfocused. I have to. The spreadsheet. Father, the margins were wrong. Your father isn't here, Leon, and the margins are fine. My heart squeezed. Seeing him like this, delirious and stripped of his armor, was worse than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. I spent the next 3 hours in a blur of motion. I used my only clean towel to make cold compresses, sitting on the floor beside his bed because he wouldn't let go of my wrist. Every time I tried to get up to get more water, his grip would tighten, his knuckles white. Don't go, he mumbled, his voice thick and broken. Noah, stay. I'm right here, you idiot. I'm not going anywhere. The vulnerability. By 7 a.m., the fever started to break. Leon was drenched in sweat, his breathing finally leveling out. I was exhausted, slumped against the side of his mattress, my head resting on my folded arms. I felt a hand move in my hair. It was light, tentative, like he was touching something he was afraid would disappear if he pressed too hard. No. I looked up. He was awake, really awake this time. His face was pale and he looked like hell. The whiskey color was in his eyes. He realized where his hand was and started to pull back, but I caught his wrist. Don't, I said. You're still sick. Rest. Can't believe you saw me like that. He whispered, a shadow of the old Leon returning. It's undignified. You were crying about spreadsheets. Vance, undignified was 3 hours ago. Right now, we're at human. He let out a weak, shaky laugh and closed his eyes. Why are you doing this? I spent weeks making your life miserable. Called you a stain. I treated you like an enemy. I finished for him. I moved closer, my face only inches from his as on the pillow. But enemies don't stay up all night making sure the other one doesn't stop breathing. And enemies certainly don't look at each other the way you're looking at me right now. The shift. The room was silent. The morning light filtered through the window, highlighting the dust motes dancing between us. The blue tape was gone, the borders were erased, and the air was charged with something that made my skin tingle. Leon reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I don't think I know how to do this. He admitted, his voice a raw confession. I don't know how to bis. Me neither, I said, leaning in until our noses brushed. But I'm a quick learner. What about you, top student? He didn't answer with words. He pulled me down the last inch, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that tasted like fever, sandalwood, and 1,000 things we hadn't been allowed to say. It wasn't perfect, it was desperate and messy and real. When we pulled apart, he was breathing hard, a faint flush on his cheeks that wasn't from the flu. I still hate your shoes, he whispered against my lips, and I still hate your personality. I breathed back. Now shut up and go back to sleep. He drifted off holding my hand, and for the first time since I'd arrived at St. Jude's, I didn't feel like a scholarship case or a troublemaker. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Chapter 8. The fragile truce. The morning after the fever broke, the air in room 402 had changed. The blue tape wasn't just gone from the floor. The psychological barrier it represented had dissolved into something terrifyingly new. I woke up to the smell of actual food. Leon was at his desk, pale but upright, with 2 steaming cups of cafeteria oatmeal and a box of high-end tea. He must have been rationing. He looked at me as I sat up, and for 3 seconds, neither of us knew where to put our eyes. You're awake, he said, his voice still a bit scratchy from the flu. I brought you breakfast. It's a thank you for the cold compresses, and for not letting me die in a puddle of my own delirium. Don't get used to it, Vance, I said, though the bite was gone from my voice. I walked over, my bare feet hitting the spot where the border used to be. I didn't stop. I stood right next to him. How's the head? Better, he whispered. He reached out, his fingers brushing my waist beneath my oversized t-shirt. It was a small, grounding touch that made my heart do a localized earthquake. But the school still expects us to be at each other's throats. My father's spies are everywhere. Noah, we can't do this in public. The public masquerade. Living a double life was harder than living an enemy life. In the dining hall, we sat at opposite ends of the long mahogany tables. When our eyes met, I had to force myself to scowl instead of checking if he'd eaten enough. When he passed me in the hallway, he'd mutter a sharp, "Watch it, Miller," but his hand would briefly graze mine in the shadow of our bags. You two are being weirdly quiet, Maya said, leaning over her tray during lunch. Usually by Tuesday, Leon has filed at least 3 formal complaints about your existence. What happened? Did you finally kill him and hide the body? Working on it, I lied, stabbing a piece of broccoli with unnecessary violence. He's just busy with his legacy project. Apparently, being a perfectionist is a full-time job. Across the room, Leon was surrounded by his usual circle of sycophants, but he looked like he was miles away. He caught my gaze, and just for a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. He looked tired. He looked like he wanted to be back in the cramped, messy sanctuary of room 402. The midnight library. The true truce happened at night. At 11 p.m., the door would lock, the lights would dim, and the roles we played for the rest of the school would fall away like dead skin. We were sitting on the floor between our beds, leaning against the frame of Leon's bed. We were supposed to be studying for the midterm, but the textbooks were forgot. I got a job, Leon said suddenly, at the campus bookstore. Minimum wage. I looked at him, stunned. Leon Vance, son of a senator, shelving paperbacks for $10 an hour. $9.50 actually, he corrected with a small, wry smile. My father officially froze my accounts this afternoon. The car is being towed tomorrow. I'm officially a scholarship case without the actual scholarship. I didn't know whether to laugh or feel guilty. He had traded a kingdom for a closet with me. I reached out, taking his hand. His palm was calloused from writing, his grip desperate. You're gonna hate it, I told him. The customers are rude, the air conditioning is terrible, and you'll have to wear a polyester vest. I've survived living with you for a month. Noah, he breathed, leaning in until our foreheads touched. I think I can handle a polyester vest, the breaking point. The kiss started as a dare, a way to silence the heavy reality of his lost fortune. But it turned into something deeper, the slow burn finally catching fire. His hands moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, erasing the last of the enemy's script. We're gonna get caught, I whispered against his lips. Let them watch, he replied, though we both knew he didn't mean it. The truce was fragile because it was built on a foundation of secrets. We were happy in the dark, but the lights of St. Jude's were always waiting to be turned back on. As I pulled him closer, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the fighting. It was the fear of what would happen when the world found out that the golden boy and the troublemaker weren't enemies anymore. Chapter 9, The Price of Loyalty. The bubble we had built in room 402 didn't just pop. It was shredded. The rumors started as a low hum, a few suspicious glances in the hallway, a lingering silence when we walked into the library together. But it turned into a roar on Thursday afternoon. Someone had taken a photo through the gap in the library archives. It was grainy, dark, and blurred, but there was no mistaking Leon's silhouette leaning into mine, my hand tangled in his hair. By dinner, the photo was the header of every gossip thread at St. Jude's. Caption: The Vance dynasty's new merger, the cold front. When I walked into the room, Leon was standing by the window. He wasn't crying, and he wasn't angry. He was just still. The kind of stillness you see in a building right before it's demolished. My father is in the dean's, Leon said, his voice flat. He's giving them an ultimatum. Either you are expelled for predatory behavior and manipulation of a high-ranking student, or I accept a transfer to a university in London. Tonight. Predatory, I felt the blood drain from my face. He's trying to pin this on me like I trapped you. He can't accept that I chose this. Noah. In his mind, I'm a masterpiece, and you're the graffiti he needs to scrub off. Leon turned to face me. His eyes were red-rimmed. He offered me a deal. If I go to London, he restores my trust fund, he keeps your scholarship intact, and he wipes the fraud investigation from your record permanently. My heart stopped. And if I stay, he ruins us both. He'll make sure no college ever looks at your transcript. He'll sue your mother's diner for some trumped-up health violation. Turn the ground we're standing on. The choice. The silence that followed was suffocating. This was the enemies to lovers tax. We had moved too fast, loved too loudly, and now the world was demanding payment. You have to go, I whispered. The words felt like swallowing broken glass. No, listen to me. I crossed the room, grabbing the front of his expensive, now wrinkled shirt. I worked my whole life to get here. My mom, whole life. If you stay and he ruins us, we lose everything. If you go, you're safe. Your future is safe. My future is a cage, Leon shouted, finally breaking. He gripped my arms, his fingers digging into my skin. I don't want the money, Noah. I don't want the name. I want this. I want the blue tape and the cheap chips and the way you look when you're arguing about math. I want you. Then stay, I breathed, my forehead thumping against his. Say and let him try. We'll fight him. He's a senator, Noah. He's not just a man, he's a system. The ultimatum. A sharp knock at the door startled us. It wasn't the dean. It was a man in a black suit, one of the senator's fixers. Mr. Vance, the man said, not even glancing at me. Your car is waiting. Your bags have already been moved from the storage unit. The senator expects your answer now. Leon looked at the man, then at me, then at the empty spot on the floor where the blue tape used to be. The slow burn had reached its peak. This wasn't about a scholarship anymore, and it wasn't about a housing mistake. It was about whether the golden boy was brave enough to be a nobody with me. Leon reached into his pocket and pulled out his St. Jude's ID card, the one that gave him access to the elite lounges, private gyms, and the Vance legacy. He walked over to the fixer and dropped it into his hand. "Tell my father," Leon said, his voice dropping into that terrifying, cold Vance tone, "that I'm staying in room 402, and if he touches a single hair on Noah Miller's head, I will go to the press with every ledger, every merger, and every offshore account I spent my summers helping him organize. He taught me how to be a shark. He shouldn't be surprised when I bite back." The fixer's eyes widened. He turned and left without a word. The door clicked shut. Leon turned back to me, his hands shaking, a wild, terrified grin breaking across his face. "Think I just committed social suicide?" "Yeah," I laughed, pulling him into a kiss that felt like a revolution. "But you're going to be the best-looking ghost this school has ever seen." Chapter 10, The Merit of Gravity. The morning of the final chapter didn't start with a sunrise. It started with the sound of a heavy weight being lifted. For the first time in my life, the air at St. Jude's didn't smell like old money and judgment. It just smelled like coffee and the faint, lingering scent of Leon's expensive, but now self-bought shampoo. We didn't stay in the room to hide. We didn't wait for the whispers to find us. "Are you ready?" Leon asked, standing by the door. He was wearing a simple black sweater and jeans, no blazer, no tie, no family crest. He looked younger, sharper, and more terrifyingly beautiful than I'd ever seen him. "I've been ready since the soup incident," I said, grabbing my messenger bag. The walk of power. We walked down the hallway of the East Tower, shoulder to shoulder. When we reached the courtyard, the world seemed to stop. The students who used to bow to Leon's name were staring, their mouths open, as the golden boy held the hand of the scholarship case in broad daylight. Leon didn't flinch. He didn't look at them. He kept his eyes forward, his grip on my hand firm and unapologetic. When we reached the dining hall, the site of our first public execution, the double doors felt like the entrance to a coliseum. We pushed them open together. The silence was instantaneous. Maya was sitting at our usual table, her eyes widening until they were dinner plates. The head of the legacy table. A few of Leon's former friends looked like they were seeing a ghost. "Table for two," I whispered to Leon, my voice echoing in the stillness. "Actually," Leon said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "I think we'll sit wherever we want." The new order. We didn't sit at the legacy table, and we didn't sit in the back corner. We sat right in the middle. "You're insane," Maya whispered, sliding into the seat across from us. "The dean is in a meeting with the board. Your father is supposedly at the airport. You guys just nuked the social hierarchy." "The hierarchy was a lie anyway," Leon said, leaning back. He looked at me, a genuine, relaxed smile breaking across his face. "It turns out when you lose everything you were supposed to be, finally find out who you actually are." "And who are you, Vance?" I asked, leaning in. "I'm the guy who's going to help you finish that economics project," he replied. "And then I'm the guy who's taking you to that greasy diner your mom works at, because I'm dying for a burger that doesn't cost $50. The epilogue. Room 402. Weeks later, the blue tape was a distant memory. The room was still small, and the walls were still thin, but it didn't feel like a cage anymore. It was our sanctuary. The floor was covered in a mess of both our books. Leon's laundry was occasionally on my bed, and my sketches were pinned to his wardrobe. I was lying on my bed watching Leon work at the shared desk. He was focused, his brow furrowed, but he looked peaceful. "Noah?" Without looking up. "Yeah, I'm glad the school messed up the housing." I hopped off my bed and walked over, leaning my chin on his shoulder. "Me too, Leon. Even if I had to ruin a $3,000 blazer to get here." "Actually," he said, turning in his chair and pulling me into his lap, "it was $4,000. And I'm still going to make you pay me back for it." "How?" He leaned in, his lips brushing mine. "I can think of a few ways." The enemy was gone. The roommate was permanent, and as the sun set over St. Jude's, the only thing left between us was a slow burn that had finally, beautifully turned into steady flame.